We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Come to Britain illegally and you will not be allowed to stay and banned for life. That's the message from the government, but will it actually work? We have an exclusive interview with Steve Bannon, not been seen on British TV for some time. We'll talk about the lockdown files. What does it mean for future pandemics? And joining me on Talking Pints, Derek Redmond, a rather well-known former sprinter. All of that and much more after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story on GB News tonight. Former Metropolitan Police Officer Wayne Couzens has been sentenced to a further 19 months in prison after pleading guilty to 3 charges of indecent exposure. The court today heard how he exposed himself to a woman on a country lane while on duty just months before murdering Sarah Everard. The 50-year-old is already serving a whole life sentence for the murder of Miss Everard in 2021. And as you've been hearing, charities are warning thousands of asylum seekers will be left permanently in limbo under new government plans to tackle illegal immigration. The new laws would ban those crossing the English Channel in small boats from claiming asylum or from returning to the UK. The government has promised to provide more safe routes. 3,000 people have already made the journey so far this year across the English Channel. That's nearly double the year before. Specialist officers investigating the car crash that killed 3 people in South Wales say they're still trying to piece together what happened. Meanwhile, tributes have been pouring in on social media for 21-year-olds Eve Smith and Darcy Ross and 24-year-old Rafal Jan, who were all killed in the accident in Cardiff. 2 others, Sophie Rousson and Shane Laughlin, remain in hospital in a critical condition. Police say the group went on a night out on Friday and were last seen in the early hours of Saturday morning. A Cabinet Office minister has accused Labour of breaching impartiality rules in the civil service. That's after former senior civil servant Sue Gray, who led the investigation into Partygate, was offered the position of Sir Keir Starmer's new Chief of Staff. Paymaster General Jeremy Quinn demanded Labour publish a record of their meetings with Miss Gray.
There are now serious questions as to whether Labour, by acting fast and loose, undermined the rules and the impartiality of the civil service. Why are they refusing to publish when they met with Sue Gray? Why can't they tell us what they discussed, where they met, how often they met? Their refusal to do so begs the question, exactly what is Labour trying to hide?
Well, time to wrap up warm tonight. A yellow weather warning for snow and ice is in place across large parts of the UK. The Met Office has issued alerts for much of the South, the Midlands, South Wales and Northern Ireland from 9 p.m. tonight until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. One's already in place in northern and eastern Scotland and north east England. Tuesday is expected to be the coldest night of the year. In March as well. That's all from me. I'm back in an hour. Now here's Farage.
Well, once again, the government are coming out with very, very tough words. Mind you, we have heard them before, but they realise that the issue of the small boats in particular and the impact it's now having on communities all over this country is racing up to very near the top of the political agenda. And it matters particularly with those voters that crossed over and voted Conservative for the first time in their lives in 2019. So tomorrow it'll be a sort of double act between Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary. Their message will be, if you come to this country illegally, you will not be allowed to stay, you will never get refugee status or citizenship, and once we've deported you, you'll be banned for life. Now, on the face of it, I, of all people, should be welcoming this because I was saying back in the spring of 2020 that unless we say and do those things very much as Tony Abbott did when he was Prime Minister of Australia to stop the flow there, unless we do these things, the problem will get significantly worse. Well, I wasn't wrong in my predictions, but I see huge problems here. Whatever happens in terms of passing this legislation, we are still signed up to a series of agreements with the United Nations, some of them going back to 1951, when the world was a very different place indeed. But the real biggie is our old friend, the European Court of Human Rights, there to enforce the European Convention on Human Rights. And that makes deporting people for a whole list of reasons very, very difficult. Now, the government will argue that they will amend or change the Human Rights Act. They'll make it more difficult for people to put down legal challenges. But they'll have to get all this past the British judiciary. And I think, all the while we're part of the ECHR, I believe none of this will work. That's my view. I haven't been wrong about this crisis so far. I will be one day, but I don't think just yet. But give me your view. Will this work? Farage at gbnews.uk. Now, all over Ireland, for the last year, there have been increasing protests in particularly small rural communities where hotels get taken over and a whole load of young men from all over the world get put in. There are all sorts of allegations about conversations that may or may not happen with underage girls. You know the story. We saw the protests in Knowsley on Merseyside the other week. And all those people that turned up accused of being far right. Well, that isn't stopping people because tonight there is a parish council meeting in Kegworth, and that's up in north-east Leicestershire. And Will Hollis, our reporter, is there for us right now. Will, good evening. Tell us what's going on behind you.
Good evening, Nigel. Yes, it's become quite a familiar story in the British dialogue right now. It's a conversation that's happening in communities up and down the country where hotels are being used to house asylum seekers, people that are often fleeing war-torn countries, but they are often met with objection, and you can hear that objection from behind me. You said that there is, of course, a parish council meeting. Of course, a parish council has very little power to stop hotels being used by asylum seekers, but the people here in Kegworth in North West Leicestershire have decided to come down to show the people that represent them, at least on that super local level, that they do have a concern. What I've been hearing from people today is that it's not necessarily the people that are coming here or where they're even coming from, but it is the numbers. This is a town, a small village of around 4,000 people or so, and 250 asylum seekers are supposedly going to be moving in here. Maybe not straight away, but certainly over the coming months. A few of them are already here. I had a conversation with a gentleman from Egypt earlier today. He said he was a refugee and he was fleeing the country because he was being persecuted. But that means that that hotel where people had weddings planned, where people would teach their children how to swim, isn't going to be used by the community anymore. And I think that's really why people are quite concerned. We've also heard a little bit of concern from Leicestershire County Council, as well as the local North West Leicestershire District Council, because they say this doesn't seem fair when 200 or so people are moving in here, and in neighbouring Nottinghamshire there is less than 100 asylum seekers that are being housed. And I think that really is that conversation, whether this is the right place for a group of people to be moved into a hotel. Now, of course, the Home Office says this is a temporary decision. They don't want to house people in these sorts of hotels, but it is costing people, the taxpayers, £6 million a day to do so, Nigel.
No, absolutely. And Will, tell me, you've been there for the day and you've been talking to people. I mean, after Knowsley, if you listen to most of British mainstream media and much of our printed media too, you would have thought that these were all far-right, violent thugs. Is that what you've seen today in Kegworth?
No, I don't think so. I'd say that the majority of people here seem to be concerned parents. I mean, I haven't been asking every single person what their politics is. I think that the majority of the people here are people from Kegworth, but it does seem maybe a few people have come from outside of Kegworth. This is the second protest of this sort. It is a little bit smaller than last week, where 2 people were arrested, 2 people have been charged. One of them was charged for assaulting a police officer, a 26-year-old. A 54-year-old was also charged for obstructing a highway. But without asking people directly what their politics is, I think this is just people that are concerned as to what might happen in their village when a large group of mainly young men come here. That seems to be what I'm hearing from people.
Will Hollis, thank you for that live report from Kegworth in North East Leicestershire. And of course, it's the usual story in Kegworth. It means that the hotel won't be open, weddings will be cancelled, birthday parties will be cancelled. The local florist, who has a contract with the hotel, will lose that contract. In fact, that particular hotel has a swimming pool, and that's the one place the community can go for kids to have swimming lessons and all the rest of it. So the knock-ons from this are serious. Well, we won't allow on this channel people who are genuinely concerned citizens all to be labelled as far-right racist thugs. It simply isn't right. Yes, of course, in any form of protest, you will always get those who come along and look for aggro. But I'm convinced as these protests grow in number around the country, these are genuinely concerned citizens. Alp Mehmet from Migration Watch joins me. Alp, I don't think even you or I, 2 or 3 years ago, would have imagined we'd be seeing scenes like this in small English villages.
Well, I think that if the numbers were inevitably going to grow in the way that they have, frankly, there was no alternative but to start putting them in places and hotels around the country. It's the government that didn't think of this as one of the consequences of their inaction and their inability to actually control the boats. And I think that this labelling of those who are genuinely concerned as right-wing, as fascist, as racist, as this, that and the other, is so hurtful to those people who have genuine concerns about their communities. You know better than anyone, Nigel, that when in 2016, when people voted, one of the reasons that they voted in the way that they did was because they were being ignored. They were being told they didn't know what they were talking about, they didn't understand, and everything that was going on was in their interests. Well, I'm afraid if the government actually is foolish enough to go along that line again, there'll be a big, big price to pay.
Yes, and of course what they're doing, this government, is they're over-promising and under-delivering. You know, we're hearing these big words from Rishi Sunak, you know, newspaper article yesterday, there'll be a lot of press tomorrow, but actually we keep hearing, don't we, from successive Home Secretaries and Prime Ministers, we're going to stop the boats, we're going to put an end to this. Well, why should this be different this time?
Why should it be different indeed? I think that what they're going to tackle is actually necessary, and they do need to tackle some of the areas. Priti Patel, she made a lot of promises. Boris Johnson made a lot of promises. Exactly what Rishi Sunak has said, that if you arrive here as an illegal, if you arrive here illegally, you will be treated as such and you will be sent back. Well, Boris didn't keep his word. I hope that Rishi does. I have a feeling that he does mean it, and he is giving Suella Braverman the support that she needs. Whether in the end the legislation that makes its way through Parliament is going to be mauled, frankly, it's going to be mauled not only in the Commons, but in the Lords as well, and particularly in the Lords. If what ends up is really pretty much the same as the legislation that we saw going through last year, then frankly it will be time wasted. I hope that this time, and I am hopeful, that the legislation that makes it onto the statute books is actually going to have some sort of effect. What it won't do is have any effect this year. It'll be by the end of the year, at the present rate, we're going to reach something like 90,000 and more people coming across illegally. Where are they going to put them? There's only hotels, and there's going to be more communities that react to that and are concerned about that.
Alp, you don't really believe this can work, do you? Because basically we're still part of the ECHR. The Prime Minister's made it clear we're going to stay part of the ECHR, and British judges are always going to rule in favour of our international obligations.
Yeah, they probably are, Nigel. It isn't just the ECHR, though. There are a lot of rules, a lot of discretionary decisions taken that have nothing to do with the legislation or our commitment to international treaties. It really depends whether the government, having got the legislation through that is now being proposed, then they actually implement and act on it. It won't solve the problem completely, but it will have an effect.
All right, Alp, thank you. Well, Alp Mehmet there, trying to be optimistic, but I've heard him on this programme before, trying to be optimistic. We all want to be optimistic. We all want to believe that the government will get a grip on this, but I haven't changed my view ever since this really started properly back in 2020. We're stuck with the ECHR. It ain't going to work. Don't hold your breath, folks, is my advice. In a minute, we'll talk about those lockdown leaks, about the role of Matt Hancock, the abuse of power by the government, their desire to lock me up because they weren't sure that I'd quarantined for 14 days, which we were told was all about the science. I'm not so sure now the recent revelations back that up. See you in a minute.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Some of your reflections on whether you think the latest initiative by Sunak and Braverman is actually going to work. John says, what if the Tories are dragging their feet, RE illegals, so they can't sort it out before the election, which they currently look like they're bound to lose? Could this be yet another single subject general election? Sorting it would give them a huge electoral boost. No, I tell you what, John, I tell you what's going to happen. They're going to make a complete and utter mess of it, and then at the next general election, say, vote for us and we'll leave the ECHR. They won't mean it. They won't believe it. They probably won't even do it. But I suspect that's where we're going. I'll make this prediction. ECHR will become a big general election issue. On Twitter, I get, of course it won't. It's yet another laughable scheme aimed at pulling the wool over our eyes. Like the new Northern Ireland deal. What a full-on sceptic there on Twitter. And Morris says, if the government don't stop the boats, the government will lose the next general election. Yes, Morris, and probably by quite some margin. Now, a little bit of light relief. On GB News last night, one of our late discussion shows, Steve N. Allen was in the chair, and he was interviewing a man who had been Matt Hancock's lawyer. Gosh, he must have been kept quite busy. But please, look and listen to this clip and it will make you smile.
Then media and crisis PR lawyer Jonathan Code, who was actually recently asked to act for Matt Hancock. Thank you for joining me.
Yes, I have to say that's disappointing because I made it absolutely clear to your programme. I asked them not to disclose that. And that is very, very poor journalism.
I've just been given the actual email that you sent to my producer, which they'd like me to read out. As a courtesy to the lady who approached me to act for Matt Hancock, I would be grateful if it was mentioned that he asked me to act for him. So it seems that you actually...
You're absolutely right that it's my mistake I missed out the knot. I take all of that back. My abject apologies.
I have to say, I think that's absolutely brilliant. And it says so much about Matt Hancock. If that's who he picks for his lawyer, no wonder we're learning what we are about all the things that happened during lockdown, including willfully trying to frighten us. Yes, willfully setting out to terrify the country. And having said they would follow the science, insisting on the 14 days quarantine, which is when they were after me, remember? Can we lock him up? Is Farage a pub hooligan? Interestingly, the medicos at the heart of this were saying no, quarantine for between 5 and 7 days would be plenty. Well, one of the people that took a fair bit of abuse One of the leading COVIDiots, I think, during the whole saga was Alan Miller, co-founder of Together. Now, anybody that opposed any aspect of government policy found themselves having a very tough time on social media, but also a fair bit of abuse, Alan, was directed at you.
Well, I think what happened was that the government succeeded in terrifying the nation, as it was said, scaring the pants off everyone. And then there was this culture, a very pernicious one, of being nasty to our fellow citizens, as though somehow we were abdicating responsibility, we were putting people in danger, rather than the very dangerous precedent, which was the undemocratic suffocation of society, as well as all the consequences that we pointed out at the time would occur in terms of health concerns, in terms of the economy, families and businesses, all of which we have seen to come true. So this environment was created using nudge, using obfuscation, and now, as we know, using lies to terrify the population. Some ran with it. They have to take responsibility for that, for heckling and shouting and smearing. But also the government, I think what's so concerning is that the government, the DCMS and others had spy units. This whole idea that we had citizens, journalists, medics and people that were concerned about our body politic, about where we were going, were treated as though we were terrorists, in fact.
Yeah, and yet that building behind us in the House of Commons, they were happy to vote for the Coronavirus Act to give sort of almost medieval king-like powers to people like Hancock, and I think David Davis and about 2 others objected. Let's hope we can all learn some lessons from this. But I'm worried whether we do learn lessons from this. Let's say there's another pandemic in a few years' time. I am told, could be a conspiracy theory, but I'm told that the World Health Organization, that rather controversial, overtly Chinese-influenced organisation, I'm told they're drawing up plans for how we should all deal with pandemics.
Well, it's true. So, there was a time when member states had much more of an influence on the World Health Organization, and that kind of has changed, as you say. And they have actually amendments they're making to the international health regulations that they want to see happen universally in terms of pandemic preparedness strategy, as they would present it. Yep. And that would be legally binding on 196 nations. Now, it should be repeated and remembered that we've got a pandemic preparedness strategy. It was just that it was jettisoned by the government, that was also championed by the so-called opposition, and that actually anyone who's concerned about that has an ability and a right and a duty, I think, to insist upon our own pandemic preparedness strategy here, that we do not have rules made elsewhere that then just get made and imposed on us. Now, at the time, we did a campaign, and Sajid Javid said, well, it's definitely the case that we will maintain our sovereignty in all of this. But you could see that the point he was making was we are quite trigger happy with all these things, right? Now, anything could happen over the next 18 months, 2 years. We don't know who's going to be in government or what the situation is. We saw that the opposition, if it can be imagined, were even more wanting to lock down and impose and suffocate for longer, further and harder. But Together, we keep making the point that in order to protect and maintain our fundamental paramount rights, we need to hold the elected accountable here, in our sovereign nation, in Britain.
As opposed to signing up to anything at World Health Organization level. Well, that's one that we're going to watch very, very closely. But our liberties and freedoms are not just being impinged upon by what happened in the pandemic. I mean, again, 15-minute cities that are being talked about. Now, a lot of the press say there's nothing to worry about. It's all hysterical. How do you see it?
Well, what we've seen is a situation where they're saying, not only are they saying nothing to worry about, they're smearing anyone who's asking questions. And whether it's the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, saying that anyone who is raising questions or doing anything is far right or whatever a vaccine denier is, I'm not sure what it is, or whether it's Oxfordshire County Council that is suppressing reports that goes against what its actual traffic study is purporting to be doing. What we're seeing is a similar thing that Matt Hancock has done across the board, right, which is like treating citizens and residents, voters with contempt, saying we know best, we're going to do this to you regardless. We're not going to listen. If we do consult, we're not going to listen to the responses. And that's why in Oxford we've got town hall event this Thursday. The councillors have not agreed to attend, but the public are going to be there. And we're doing that. We're doing that in various cities around the country. In Bath, there's just been a big protest in Cambridge. And across the UK, Nigel, what's happening is people are saying we're not going to put up with this anymore. So that's really good from the point of view of holding people accountable. But I think we've got a technocratic class, basically, who are just used to saying we're the ones, the bright ones, we know best, either in a nasty way like Matt Hancock, jeering and cavalier and treating us with contempt, or in a way that's a bit more condescending, but they behind closed doors in a different fashion, but always sidelining us. That's also why we're launching a cabinet together, where we're saying that the public has to be at the heart of all these considerations. And in a range of areas, we're going to have spokespeople that are going to put elected representatives under pressure.
I have to say, I'm a big supporter of your work, and I think, Alan, thank you for joining me. And I think we've learned that lockdown was a disaster, and they weren't always following the science. They were often just playing politics. And I don't need to give balance to that argument. Just read Matt Hancock's texts and tweets. It's perfectly clear. In a moment, we're going to have an exclusive interview with Steve Bannon. Back in a couple of minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Steve Bannon was a hugely influential figure in 2016 in the election of President Trump. He worked next to him in the White House for a few months. He now runs his own daily podcast, Bannon's War Room, and he is highly influential in American conservative circles. Very, very controversial, a hate figure of much of mainstream media and the left. And I got the first exclusive interview with him on British television for many, many years. But think about this. On the day we learn, we're planning to have a big concert, rather like Live Aid at Wembley, in order to raise money for Ukraine and Ukrainians. Opinion in America about funding Ukraine is changing very, very quickly. The Americans have already put in $140 billion, dwarfing anything the rest of us have done. Here's Steve Bannon, and listen out in particular for what he has to say about Ukraine. Steve Bannon, we've not seen much of you in the British media for a long time, but you are portrayed, when they write about you
That's because the British media is dumb and lazy. If you read The Guardian, at least the U.S. edition, you'll catch a lot of what we're because we're at the tip of the spear of the populist nationalist movement. And, of course, what the Tories stand for, and British politics is a disaster right now. The Tories stand for absolutely nothing. They're going to get smoked, as I've been saying, they're going to get smoked when the next election comes up. And then there'll be some reformation of true British politics, I think, around more of a populist nationalist mentality. The reason that we're not covered as much is very simply, I don't think the British political press understand. They're dumb, they're lazy, and they're bought off. They want to continue to push the narrative that's out there. And quite frankly, the United Kingdom, as you saw from the financial crisis you had last year, is really in it now. I tell you, really bad.
Yeah, we're not in a great place.
Not a great place. You're in a terrible place. Not in a great place is too nice. You're in a terrible place. Rubini came out today. The professor, I think, is up at Harvard, that talks about the global capital markets. The British got the preamble to it last summer. When you try to have tax cuts that are really unfunded tax cuts. Tax cuts are fine. But you can't do that when you have this social spending. You've got to get control of your budget and actually look at where the spending's going to come from, and your pensions were totally exposed. Remember, right now, your pensions, you know this as a capital markets guy, there's so much hinky stuff in those pensions, so much derivatives to try to juice the returns and zero interest rates. The whole pension, all the pensions in the UK, the bottom could blow out. We're in a financial, economic crisis that's only going to get worse.
Now, I was very interested to see Ron DeSantis. We haven't heard much from Ron DeSantis about the UK, but a big piece in the Times newspaper, DeSantis saying that going to play golf at St Andrews was one of the great moments of his life, analysing that Brexiteers, he compared them to the founding fathers in the USA, because this was the first Brexit after all. But also DeSantis being very critical of the Conservative government, saying they've not delivered Brexit properly. It's left people disappointed. Does DeSantis get this stuff?
First off, let's talk about the Times. It's a Rupert Murdoch. I mean, let's be honest. The Fox is totally blacked out Trump. You're getting softball interviews. You're getting t-ball interviews. You're getting infomercials for those candidates. Ron DeSantis is a good man. He's a patriot. He served his country. He's been an excellent governor. Yeah. But the problem is he still looks at the framework that all the Republicans, from Nikki Haley to Tim Scott, they're all good people. But they still have this construct of neocon neoliberalism, right? That worldview cannot survive. We can't finance it. The people in this audience are the ones going to have to write the checks. Their pension funds, their tax money, and their sons and daughters are going to go die on foreign battlefields. And the people of England have to understand right now, if you continue down this path, your sons and daughters are going to be dying in Ukraine, fighting for the Ukrainians to take back Crimea. If that's what the British people want, then continue to back neoliberal neocons.
There's a lot more skepticism here, isn't there, about Ukraine and about giving money?
We're going to go zero money. Cut it all off. You got to. Zelensky, they have to go to the negotiating table and figure this thing out. There's 40,000. What the Defense Department says is 40,000 dead women and children, and they're fighting over the Russian-speaking eastern border of Ukraine and talking about this crazy thing. Biden said, "Oh, the Ukrainians get to decide. They get to decide American foreign policy to go, and they want to take." They want a return of all the territories, including Crimea. I know. They want $1 trillion in reparations from the Russians. And more importantly, they're saying we're going to have war crime trials. If I remember my World War II history correctly, Churchill and FDR, Montgomery and Patton, we beat the Nazis first, and then we had the war crime trials. We beat the Japanese Imperial Army first, and then we had the war crime trials. Don't tell a guy he's going to be a war criminal. He's going to fight to the bitter end.
So you think that American public opinion is going to force Biden into zero funding?
Well, first off, the MAGA movement and the Republican minority of MAGA in the House is going to stop the funding. That's where it's first going to come from. I think you're going to see some of the populist stuff join us. We can't afford it. We're talking about right now, you talk about spending. We're talking about $2 trillion in cuts on Medicaid, not Medicare, Social Security, over the next 10 years. We're talking about other social social safety net cuts. We're talking about significant cuts in the defense budget. If you're going to do that to American citizens, and I'm all for cutting Medicaid, you can't be giving $200 billion to the Ukrainians. Right now, we're putting $5 billion a month to pay their pensions and to pay their health care. People in the United States don't have pensions. People in the United States don't have health care. You expect the working class people in this audience are going to write checks so that the Ukrainian government, which is taking 10% of the top.
No, I can see a change.
For your British audience, understand that we're going to fight this. No money to the Ukraine. Make the Ukrainians go to the negotiating table and figure it out. No more killing fields in Ukraine. No more dead women and children fighting over this border dispute that's going to get focused.
I tell you, I mean, in the UK at the moment, there is almost unanimity of view that we're doing the right thing. So your comments,
Okay,
I think.
fine. Okay. Look back to last summer. First off, you can't afford it. It's a fantasy. First off, the guy that runs Commons, the Armed Services Committee at Commons, told us the other day that the British military can last 5 days in a conflict. You're not a NATO. Look, the best ally we've got is Great Britain, and quite frankly, you could put up one combat division. That's coming from your own defense secretary. You've had such massive defense cuts. You're not prepared. The British people are not prepared to start paying, and they should understand. The days of the United States having Europe as a vassal state militarily are over.
I know.
We're not paying for NATO anymore. I was the one that tip of the spear for President Trump to say, you got to put up to 2% of GDP. And people laughed in my face. The Germans said, well, we can't do that. We have to, by constitutional law, we have to have a balanced budget. I said, dude, we wrote that, or by our Constitution, I said, we wrote that Constitution for you after we beat the Nazis. So don't tell me that the American people don't have pensions, don't have health care, and you do, because we're paying for your defense. Europe has to understand, and the British people, our greatest ally, have to understand, the days of the United States of America underwriting these ridiculous forever wars. We just got out of Afghanistan, Iraq after 20 years, $9 trillion on our budget, on our balance sheet, $9 trillion. Plus, there's like 15,000 dead and another 50,000 wounded. We're having 25 veterans a day kill themselves with PTSD. Those days are over.
Love it or hate it, there's more of that. A full interview on gbnews.uk. Quick thought. Boris Johnson's father, Stanley, is apparently in the honours list. He's going to become a knight. He says Stanley. I don't know what the citation will read. I'd have thought most appropriate would be services to the Chinese Communist Party. In a moment, Talking Pines, I'll be joined by former gold medal winning sprinter Derek Redmond.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
It's Talking Pints. I've got Derek Redmond with me today. Derek, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much. Good health.
Now, you were there at the top of athletics for a long time, year after year after year. And I bet there are loads of kids, members of athletics clubs, thinking what a glamorous life it is at the top of athletics, but I bet it wasn't.
No, the easiest way to explain that, when we got on the plane to go to internationals, we turned right, not left. So that's point number one. No, it was a tough old slog, but I enjoyed it. You know, it was, once you sort of made it on an international level, the aim was to stay there. You became a target. People knew who you were. You had to train and dedicate yourself to everything. And I hesitate when I use that word dedicate, because people say to me, oh, you must have been so dedicated. I actually don't believe I was dedicated.
Really?
I loved what I did.
Okay.
And it was my life. If I hated it and did it, maybe that was dedication, but I absolutely loved it. I don't feel I missed out on anything in life. The people that I trained with, the people I competed with, the people I travelled with.
And you were good at it.
And I wasn't too bad at it.
You were good at it. But it wasn't just you that was good at it. We had lots. 400 metres. I mean, it's a heck of a tough race, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it a long sprint?
It's a controlled sprint. It is a long sprint. It's the longest sprint. You can't run it flat out, so it's a controlled sprint.
Yeah. But we had other people who were very good at it. Now, you won titles and set records, but the one that really lives with people, of course, is the 1991 World Championship, up against the favourites.
The Americans.
The Americans. And you guys, we didn't just win it, did you? You smashed it.
Well, we didn't smash it. We won it. There's only a few attempts in it, but we defeated the Americans for the first time in 56, 57 years. They hadn't been beaten at international standards, at world or Olympic level. And at the last minute, we changed our order. The team management wanted us to run a certain order. We said, we think this would be the right order. Took a little bit of convincing, but they let us do it. And basically, we made Akabusi look good. We gave him the battle in a position that he couldn't lose it from. He'll tell you the other way around. But
the time you set was a very good time, wasn't it?
At the time, it was a British, European, Commonwealth record. But interestingly enough, the Americans had actually run quicker that year than the time that we won.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it was a hell of a win. Funny thing is, Derek, we all get defined in life, sometimes for things we wouldn't necessarily plan.
I know where this is going.
I mean, I'm quite friendly with Mike Gassing. Poor old Mike Gassing is defined by the Shane Wall ball of his head. Doesn't matter that Gat was a great cricketer, great county player, England captain, but kind of that defines him.
Yeah.
And what defines you is a very, very famous moment, which we're going to play on the screen now for those watching on television. But for those listening in radio, we'll explain what happened.
1992 Olympics, one of the favourites for a medal, won the first two rounds, semi-final, going down the back straight, pulled a hamstring, and I decided to get up and finish the race. And with 100 metres to go, as is once described, a portly gentleman joined me on the track to assist me, and it was my dad, and we finished the race together.
Let's have a look at those pictures.
The official winning time of 44.50.
It was, I guess that was hurting in lots of ways, wasn't it?
Yeah, obviously physically. Pulling a hamstring at the speed that I was going at wasn't great. I ran the back straight approximately in about 10.2, 10.3 seconds, so it's pretty quick to pull a hamstring. Yeah. And obviously mentally to go for all that. I'd had injury problems before. The whole medical team of Team GB at the time worked round the clock to get me on the track, and it wasn't hamstring problems, it was Achilles tendon problems. I was in shape. My coach done a fantastic job. And yeah, for that to happen just crucified me.
Did you know that was the end?
No, I really, really didn't. Even after pulling my hamstring, people asked me what made you get up, because I still thought I could qualify, which obviously was never going to happen. But no, I tried to make a comeback for 18 months. Ended up having lots and lots and lots of surgeries because of the problems, and then after 18 months I was told I'd never compete for my country again, which was quite funny because I then sent that same surgeon a photograph of me playing basketball for England.
I'm going to come to that in a moment. I'm going to come to that in a moment. The ever-competitive Derek Redmond. I'm going to come to that in a moment. But amazingly, that clip, and it's, I mean, I guess your dad coming through security and doing that, there's an incredible human side to that.
Yes.
I guess that's what, that in a way is what really makes it work, I think.
100%. I mean, you know, it's one of the, it's gone down as the third most, you know, popular, you know, Olympic moment or greatest Olympic moments. And I think the thing that makes it is not just me getting up and running, it's my dad coming on.
I agree.
Onto the track. My wife once said to me a few years ago, she goes, if it was your coach, if it was a teammate, if it wouldn't have had the same effect. The fact that it was your dad, and that actually makes it a lot more realistic and can kind of trying to think of the right word. You know, people get it because
they can connect.
Parents,
with it. Yeah,
people can
absolutely.
connect to it, and you know, because they see Olympians as superhuman.
Yeah,
but that made it human.
And 30 years on, it never goes away, does it?
No, it doesn't. It still comes back. It still comes on my timeline. And I mean, my dad, God rest his soul, he passed away last October. He was still surprised when we used to get asked to be interviewed, and he said, they're still talking about it. Yes, Dad.
It's going to be with you forever.
Yeah, it is.
But you, the competitive so-and-so that you are,
slightly.
Clearly. So then it's basketball.
Well, it went to basketball. I did a couple of years of basketball, got an international. Then I tried to be the first person to compete for their country in 3 sports. So I quit basketball, got into rugby, played professionally. Tried out for England for sevens, didn't make it. Then I got into racing motorcycles. The team I had won a national title. Then I got into kickboxing, won a national title at that. And now I'm involved in boxing. So,
Do you ever sit down and watch the telly?
Every now and then, yeah. No, I'm just, you know, someone who enjoys getting out there, sport, and you know, and want to compete still.
It's about competing, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. I love competing. I love putting myself in those situations where the gun's about to go, the bell's about to go, whatever it is.
It's the buzz.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, yeah.
It's the buzz.
Absolutely, but it's also getting there. It's
were you like this as a kid?
Yes, but I didn't really recognise it back then. I mean, I don't think, from a sporting point of view, from training and competing, I've ever changed. I'm recognising that now, but as a kid, I did it just because it was natural and something that I wanted to do. But now I look at it, yes, I was.
Excuse me. On top of the sport, you're doing motivational speaking. Now, I find that really interesting. Who are your audiences?
It's mainly in the corporate world. So I've been speaking now for 26 years.
Yep.
I'm also what's known as a business performance coach. So I basically take what I've learned from the world of sport and transport that into the world of business. You know, sport is a business and business is a sport, which is a title of a book that I wrote. And that's pretty much what I advocate. So I would say 90% of my audience is in the corporate world.
Is it?
I do quite a lot, obviously, with some students and, you know, at high schools and universities. But the bulk of the work is in the corporate world.
How much of sport is mental?
If you're talking about an hour before a final, 100% mental. You know, you can't do any more training just before you go and perform, you know, half an hour before there's nothing else you can do. It's a pure mental game. But I would say a lot of it is more mental than it is physical. Yeah, you can almost say 50-50, but there's a huge mental aspect to it, even with your training, even with your attitude, your mindset. I mean, there's that saying, you know, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're most probably right. You know, and that's one true thing that I advocate to a lot of people, whether it's in sport or in business. You've got to believe in your heart of hearts that you can achieve whatever it is that you know, you want to achieve. So a hell of a lot of it is mental, the most important muscle in your body.
Yeah, I think maybe a lot of people sort of sit and watch sport, listen to sport at a top level, perhaps don't realise how important that whole mental side of things is.
Absolutely.
I think it's enormous.
Yeah, yeah.
And Derek, on top of all that, You've done some charity work. You've supported several charities.
Yes, yeah, quite a few. So I do stuff for Sports Aid Foundation. They gave me a grant when I was a young lad. I do a lot for Rainbows charity, a hospice up in Loughborough, and I do quite a lot of auctioneering, charity auctioneering. So I do a lot through there, and I think already to date this year I've possibly raised about £120,000. And we're only in March, so I'd like to get over £1 million, if I can this year, and I love it. Why not?
Never backwards in coming forwards, our guest on Talking Pints tonight. How's the boxing going?
OK, undefeated so far. So my fight won't be until next fight won't be until next March, because I'm having some work done on the old Nashers. Yeah. So I've got to get them looking good, and I certainly don't want anybody knocking them out once they're done.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for joining me on Talking Pints.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Well done, you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Well, that was fun. Now it's time for Barrage the Farage. Let's see what you've got for me today. Mary asks me, do you expect the small boats to stop coming now the government have shown determination to ask them to go away? Mary, we need to just sort of get our memories working here. David Cameron, if you come to Britain illegally, you will be deported. Boris Johnson, if you come to Britain illegally, you will be deported. Much the same from Priti Patel and others, and now we're hearing it from Rishi Sunak. It's never going to happen. All the while we're signed up to the ECHR, and all the while we have the current British judiciary. That has been my view since the start of this crisis back in the spring of 2020, and it hasn't changed now. Ryan says, is Greygate confirmation that the civil service have been infiltrated by Tony Blair's cronies? Well, joining me early is Jacob Rees-Mogg. Interesting, wasn't it, today in the House of Commons? It was the Labour benches looking and feeling very embarrassed.
Yes, they were pretty much empty, and it was the Conservatives who were saying, can we trust the civil service anymore? And my view is that we can't, actually, that what has been a wonderful constitutional success for us, the Northcote Trevelyan independent civil service, has now gone, and we've got to recognise that.
And our questioner actually is right, that actually it was in Blair's time that we saw the beginnings of the politicisation of something which since Gladstone.
That's right. That's absolutely spot on. You're right. Your viewer, as so often, has great wisdom in expressing it so clearly.
Well, absolutely. The People's Channel.
Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
Exactly. I knew. I was waiting for that. Well, over to you, Dibbo.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Right, Jacob Rees-Mogg is up next. Jacob, tell us what you've got.
Well, we've got a fun-filled programme, lots of things going on. We're talking about the prevent strategy, why that didn't work, what some of the problems were. Even people like me were considered to be at risk. I'm sure you must have been on their lists as well. We're going to talk about some of the Hancock issues. Tim Stanley's coming in, had an excellent column in the Telegraph, so we're going to go into some of the greater details of that as to what was going on and whether the people actually wanted it.
Well, I'm not sure they did. But before all of that, we better have a look at the weather, I think.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. It stays on the cold side over the coming few days. The risk of snow and ice widely frosts overnight as well. Looking at the bigger picture, Arctic air plunging south across the UK, bringing snow showers to many northern areas. Across the south, we will see some weather fronts bringing some outbreaks of rain, sleet and some snow at times too over the next few days. A lot to play for with the details, so stay tuned to the forecast. Turning icy as we head into the early hours of tonight. Further snow showers for Northern Ireland, Scotland. Cloudier across central parts of England and Wales and southern England, where we will see some outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow. Met Office warnings for snow and ice cover quite large parts of the UK to take us into Tuesday morning. Temperatures starting well below freezing across Scotland, Northern England, Northern Ireland. Snow showers from the word go here, but plenty of sunny spells too. Cloudier skies across parts of the Midlands, southern Wales, outbreaks of rain for southern counties of England with some sleet and snow mixed in there too. Some slushy accumulations possible. Lots of places seeing sunshine in the afternoon on Tuesday, but very cold. Temperatures below average, 3 to 5 Celsius generally. Some places in Scotland staying below freezing all day. Further icy stretches possible quite widely as we move into Tuesday evening and overnight. Further snow showers for northern Scotland. Temperatures plummeting well below freezing. Further weather systems moving into southern parts of England and Wales. Some uncertainty with the placement of this, but could lead to some accumulating snow across the higher ground here, so do stay tuned to the forecast. Warnings already in force across southwest England to take us into Wednesday here. So it stays quite grey, the risk of some rain, sleet and snow across southern counties of England, but elsewhere Wednesday looking like a cold sunny day, plenty of sunny spells, still the risk of a few snow showers across northern and eastern Scotland down into northeast England. So cold few days to come, temperatures generally below average for the time of year, widespread frosts and ice to take care. See you again soon.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Good evening. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. The State of the Nation tonight.